Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about some more stuff for the Interact post, looking at some of the things that are to be coming out in 5.5. We did do one last week, but there's plenty of more information that we want to go through and new things that have come out. So in the past few days, we have seen a better look, first and foremost, at the new banners. First, we're seeing, obviously, on the first half, we're going to see Varisa, new character. We've already made a video on her. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out, go ahead and check out our channel talking about her new kit and how she's going to kind of work, at least for version 1. And then beside her on the same banner, we're going to have Sean Yoon. So Sean Yoon's getting her rerun with Varisa, which kind of makes sense considering they do kind of similar that plunge idea. So that should actually be a pretty good banner. And then we have in the other half, Shilonen and Venti. This is kind of more or less, I think, just an Archon rerun with a character who is very, very highly used. So I think this banner is actually going to be very highly pulled for. And then the 4 stars we're looking at here so far are Yansan, Gaming, Farzan, Beidou, and Yanfei. So overall, looking at everything, those are at least what the banners are going to be. Rift, what are you thinking about this banner specifically?
Yeah, so like real quick, obviously Shanyun makes a lot of sense to be paired with Varisa. Varisa being a plunge DPS that we've already talked about. Shanyun probably being one of those premium supports or kind of luxury supports for Varisa. Probably very good. I don't know if that's like required. There's definitely going to be some like other teams you can do. I'm still curious about like a Chevy overload team with Varisa, which obviously can't have Xianyun, among some other teams. But obviously those two together make a lot of sense is the point. Yansan's going to probably be on that side the first half to be with Varisa, but honestly, Yansan could be pushed off to the second half. We've seen that happen before with the new 4-star and the new 5-star being separated out like that. But yeah, so the 5 stars make a lot of sense. Second half, Venti had to have a rerun somewhere in 5.5, so that once again makes a lot of sense, and I think it makes more sense being on second half than first half. I don't know, it just does because Archon and new character, I don't know, people could get mad at that, I guess, because people were mad at Mawika Sit Lolly, and maybe for the same reason people will still be mad anyways with the Varisa Shanyun, because it's like, oh, put the, premium support with the, character that, like, wants that, so
Always
who
find a
knows,
way to get
who
mad.
knows? Right, that's the point we're at, but yeah, like you said, these are, if this is what it is, this is pretty stacked, new character, good support. Shilonen rerun, she's kind of like the, bear with me when I say this, but she's kind of like the Neuvillette of Natlan, because I say that based on banners, not based on like the kits and like what they do, because Neuvillette came out in 4.1, but then he had a very quick rerun in 4.5, which was only like 4 versions later, and here we're seeing the same thing with Shilonen, if this is the case, 5.1 to 5.5 again, and I think it's great because Shilonen's one of the best characters to have on your account, period. Just she's pretty much the best, one of the best supports in the games. So a lot of sense. Like, yeah, very solid stacked banners.
Yeah, usually for 5.5, or usually after we get the character or the banners for 0.3, or usually when the Archon comes out, they start to take a dip. And with 5.4, they kind of did. But 5.5 is actually kind of turning out to not be a dry patch. There's a lot of good stuff. So speaking of a lot more good things, let's talk about the quality of life changes that are going to be coming out in 5.5 as well. Now, there's plenty of more things, but we've kind of highlighted 4 things that we really want to talk about. The first thing is going to be you're able to exit the game directly to desktop. So instead of going back to the screen that is immediately just like your home screen, or basically where you have the doorway, instead of that screen going back to that, if you exit out of the game, now you're going to immediately go right back to desktop or right back to the launcher. I had those completely flipped, so my brain was completely lagged on that, but hopefully that at least makes sense now for you guys as well. The next thing we have is the artifact overflow, which it's going to have, I believe it's going to be an event, so it's going to have 2 times artifact rewards. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a I mean, it seems like it's going to be an event. I don't think that it's going to be a permanent thing, because this would be just absolutely insane. But it states that it currently does not include Natlan artifacts, but it should be included in the test servers in about a week. But beyond that, we see the ability to have that 2 times artifact reward. So for a lot of those people that have been kind of wanting that, honestly, an amazing event to really have. I think it's happened once or twice before. So I think most people, especially once you get to a certain part of the game, those are very helpful events. So to see more of those come out is very helpful. The next thing we want to talk about, number 3, is there's a description change and how the sanctifying elixir has been changed. They've kind of listened to a few things, and so now they're going to change how the sanctifying elixir works. So it states that artifacts generated from consuming sanctifying elixir will be guaranteed to receive at least 2 enhancements into chosen minor affixes at max level. the number of guaranteed enhancements are shared between all specified minor affixes. So basically what that means is you have at least 2 enhancements or basically 2 of those are guaranteed to go into the 2 substats that you chose to put into the artifact. So let's say you grabbed a flower and you really want to, or let's say it's a goblet, a pyro damage bonus goblet on Obsidian Codex because you want to put on your Malwika. And if you put crit rate and crit damage in the past, it had the ability for that, plus 20 to just go really into anything, but now it guarantees at least 2 of those enhancements out of the 5 are or out of the 4, whatever, to be guaranteed to go into crit rate and crit damage. So at least those aren't absolutely useless pieces anymore, and they just completely go into like flat HP or something that you happen to roll as well with it. So a very good buff for that. Looking at the next thing, we have number 4, which is, this is only going to be applicable to the US, but we kind of had recent things with the whole issue in the past with all the, Genshin having issues with, selling to underage kids and all this other stuff, and how that was possibly a problem, and basically a lot of US issues and everything that happened. So now they're throwing something small into effect that they'll probably roll out bigger in the future. But the first thing is, if you're under the age of 18 or under the age of 13, you will be restricted from using functions related to in-game friends, and this can be lifted with parental controls and the ability to change your in-game nickname. So a lot of stuff that's happened here, but one by one, Rift, what are you thinking at least?
I guess starting with that US only thing right there at the end, since you're still on that, which is pretty interesting. If you watched our video a while back on the FTC, or maybe you saw some other creators' opinions on the FTC thing with Hoyoverse more specifically being addressed by, the US government. I think this is the start of, like you said, Vixen, where they're going to try to implement some kind of change where, to kind of address back at that. So we'll see how that goes out. This is kind of just a little sneak peek into that. But as far as the other things, the Sanctifying Elixir, definitely a much needed thing. I actually had this happen recently where I did use that to get, I think, one of the obsidian pieces actually, and it just rolled terribly. I was so depressed. I was like, man, I just used like 4 Sanctifying Elixirs. I had it. It was some kind of damage bonus, crit rate, crit damage, and it just, I didn't touch them. It was depressing. So at least
save your
this is awesome.
Everyone.
Yeah, basically. So this guarantees that it's mid at the very least. It can't be absolute garbage, but it will be mid at least. That sounds kind of funny, but it's actually kind of nice. That's a good change though. The next thing we'll look at, and I'll just cover this briefly because I know this isn't for everyone, kind of similar to like maybe TCG isn't also for everyone, but if you're like me and you like the permanent music event that we got from a while back, we are going to be getting a new album for Natlan tracks, and I'm so pumped for this because I've been waiting for this a long time, and if you like this event, you've also been wondering, I guess, maybe when's the Natlan, music going to come out to be playable on that, because that's going to be a lot of fun. So we will be getting that pretty soon. It doesn't say specifically if that's 5.5, it could be 5.6, but at least we're seeing something. So that's definitely a development right there.
Yeah, there's definitely a few changes that the quality of life is going to bring, and that's going to be helpful. And I know that I absolutely don't care about the music event, but I know that I am probably in the minority on that one. So looking a little bit further, beyond that, we have a free Auroron that's going to be coming in 5.5 in an event, probably a larger event of some sort, especially since we are jumping into a new area and region. It makes sense that they're going to throw in a bigger event. So just like this previous event we've had in 5.4, there's probably going to be a big event, and this one's probably going to be holding the free Auroron for people. So for some people, it's going to be their first. For some people, it's going to be a nice constellation. Some people, it's just going to be another wish to throw into because they already have C6, but at least it's there.
I think this is great just because Auroron was on the Chaska banner, and at the top of my head, I'm just thinking, obviously, a majority of people weren't pulling on that banner. A lot of people didn't like Chaska. Lenny's a little bit, somewhat of an older character. Arlecchino is probably just the better Pyro DPS to have. Malwika already was about to come at that point in time, so who was wanting to really, I guess, pull Lenny, unless you just like Lenny. All of that to say, I think this is great for a lot of those people who just knew they didn't want to pull on that. So if they still don't have Auroron, hey, here's your Auroron. So that's gonna feel good.
Yeah. Beyond that, we have the volcanic eruptions are going to be happening in the overworld. Now we are going into a volcanic region, so there's going to be a volcano. Beyond that, it's going to basically have some sort of a sky turning into orange, and then having some different music throw in with some fireballs slamming into the ground, kind of similar to what you might see. Well, it's not really similar, but the idea is similar to what you saw in Inazuma, kind of an area that's not going to be very friendly to most people. So keep an eye out for that. I do kind of like that, though. It is kind of a nice, does immerse you a little bit more into the characters, into the world at least. Now, beyond the regular kind of quote-unquote basic stuff, now let's get into the endgame stuff. So the first thing we have is the Imaginarium Theater for May and 5.5. The opening characters are going to be, it looks like, Neuvillette, Candace, Ayaka, Charlotte, Albedo, and Kachina. And the elements are going to be Hydro, Cryo, and Geo. Special guests are going to be Hu Tao, Kuki, Kaveh, and Lynette. And there's going to be some sort of Night Soul trial for the bosses as well. So some pretty interesting things. A very interesting element lineup. What are you thinking, Rift? I mean, this is somewhat good.
No, you're right on that. Obviously, when you have Hydro, Cryo, and Geo, some of the first things that come to my mind at least is some Shatter stuff. You're gonna get a lot of Frozen or Freeze teams, but also some Geo teams. And like, maybe Claymore characters on the Freeze, you're gonna trigger Shatter. I know Geo and Cryo have some Shatter stuff. Yeah, I honestly, like, maybe depending on the enemies that show up in this one, it's going to be a blast actually using Eula for people that have that. And, not being able to use that all the time in the Abyss, because the Abyss just doesn't, if you try to make physical work, you're just going to hit a brick wall most of the time. But this will be great to, like, pull out Eula for the people that have it and have a blast with it. I haven't built Fremine, so I'm going to have a blast with that, which I know is a hot take. But hey, I like using my Fremine. Opening characters seem great. Neuvillette, Ayaka is an older one, but still awesome, especially for Freeze. That'll be a lot of fun for people that have that. And then with the special guests, I like that Kaveh's in here, because the first thing that came to my mind is Dendro is not one of the elements to be used here. So Kaveh's going to be the only Dendro character you can play. But because Hydro is available, if you have Nilou, you can still use Nilou and have Kaveh as that driver. And he doesn't need to have crit. He just needs to have good amount of ER and EM, and you're pretty much set, and you'll have a pretty good Bloom team already. So that'll be an option that's not Freeze or Geo related. So it'll be interesting though, for sure.
My Kaveh will not be used because I do not have Nilou. So for you non-Nilou havers, disregard. Not to say that it can't be used, it still can, but you could probably use it at the early levels and probably just get, quote unquote, get rid of him. But yeah, there's that. The next thing we want to talk about though is the new Thespian tricks that are coming out. So Wanderer, Ganyu, and Xinyan, and Lisa are going to have their Thespian tricks, or basically those poses that you can grab. So there's that. But moving on to the actual useful information, possibly, the last thing we want to talk about is the Spiral Abyss. So in 5.5, we got some helpful information from some other people stating that in 5.5, but it seems like it's actually going to be very difficult for the Hydro character cast. And the reason why is because of a specific boss that we're looking at. And the first boss that the only boss we're really going to talk about is the Lava Dragon statue. Now, this is the new boss that's coming in the overworld in Natlan, so obviously this is going to be thrown into the Abyss now as well. Looking at the boss's, like, things to be stated about it, it has, in the overworld, 70% all resistance to all elements, and also to physical. The Abyss is going to have 150%. Initially, it is going to start in the Geo-human form, which is you're going to see, like, I'll throw in like the picture on the left side, which is kind of him like as not full of lava or anything. He's just kind of hardened, if you will. After taking enough pyro attacks, though, he will evolve into the Molten Dragon form, which you're going to see on the right. When in the Molten Dragon form, after taking enough pyro attacks, you'll lose HP and become weakened for 13 seconds, which will then, or the specific boss will lose HP and become weakened for 13 seconds. So you're actually going to want to do a lot of pyro attacks on this enemy to then get him into this weakened state, which then drops his resistance to negative 50% in the overworld or 10% in the Abyss. So allowing him to take more damage, kind of going to that weaker state, allowing you to do more damage. Normally, when you see a pyro element, you really want to throw Cryo or especially Hydro on the team. So why is Hydro not good? Well, this is why at the end. When in the Molten Dragon form, so when he's kind of filled with lava, and he's not weakened yet, taking Cryo or Hydro attacks from your characters will cause the enemy to lose progress for his Molten Dragon state, therefore throwing him back into the Geo-human form, which puts him back at the 70 or 150% resistance. So you actually want him to be in the like lava state. You actually don't want to, like with other enemies, like I think with the crab, you want to take off that pyro as much as possible. Here you're trying to do the opposite. You're trying to just go pure pyro. So characters like Neuvillette, characters like Farina are actually going to take a step back in this Abyss, and some of those other Hydro characters as well. So some of those interesting teams are going to come out. And Rift, what do you have to say about that?
I mean, like you said, Hydra's just taking a back seat. Now, I think you can still Unga Boonga with Hydro. Your damage numbers aren't going to be as high. If you have like, I would only say do that if you have like a C2 Farina, C1 Neuvillette, or something like that. To where it'll still perform like okay and get the job done, but you're gonna definitely probably struggle, and we'll see as when that comes out, because it just depends on how powerful the boss is intrinsically, which I'm gonna think it's pretty strong, because 5.5, we've already kind of seen the new characters, in Mawika, power creeping and all of this stuff. So it's going to be a hard boss is my thought. So I definitely wouldn't use Hydro, like you said, unless you just Unga Boonga because you have Constellations or something. But I think for starters, though, on just teams in general, Mono Pyro Lenny will probably be very good. Any Overload team is going to be great. Chevy Overload teams, I think, will probably be, in my head at least, because I'm not thinking of anything else at the moment, I think that'll be some of the ceiling best teams against this boss specifically.
For sure.
A Chevy Overload with Arlecchino, heck, even Mawika, maybe using Oraron or Yansan with her. That'll be fun. Verisa that also qualifies for this, doing a Verisa Overload with Chevy. Clorant, there's still lots of options, and I think that team will just be a very solid option on this thing, because it'll keep them in that weakened state.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some fun ones. I think the biggest one is the Linny team. So I think a lot of those Linny lovers are actually going to come out of the cracks and under the rocks and come back and have a little bit of time to shine. I think that's really, really fun. Obviously, your Kazuha Shilonen with a Pyro DPS team is also going to work extremely well here. So
Absolutely.
Arlecchino stands the test of time a little bit longer than other characters now, but it just depends on the Abyss. So that's at least what we've got for the Abyss for right now. Once again, like Rift said, you could probably Unga Bunga it and just hit it till it dies, and probably strong enough, it'll probably work. But in a sense of following the Abyss or following the specific mechanic, Hydra's actually going to hurt you rather than help you. Now, you can still use Hydro, so if you have like if you want to use another character in the meantime, have like a dual DPS or something, technically you can use enough Pyro or use like a Xiangling or use other characters to just get him to that state where he gets weakened, because it does state that taking Cryo or Hydro attacks will cause to lose progress. But the idea to keep in mind is that when it states that when you're in the Molten Dragon form and not already weakened, then it's going to cause it to lose progress. If he's already weakened and he's already in the Molten Dragon form and then weakened, then you can still use Hydro attacks. So you can still make a workaround on it, but it's just going to be easier probably. It's just, once again, it's just going to be easier to really work with it the other way.
Right. Like, I guess when you say that now, my thought is if you could still use Mualani, but you just can't, because like her attacks are very infrequent. She doesn't apply Hydra a lot. So maybe that team would still work. A Mualani with the off-field Mawika, and maybe only using Mawika on field, even though she's more of a sub DPS in that team. If you have like a Mualani, Seatlali, Dendro character, Mawika, then you could still pump out a lot of Mawika damage just because Seatlali's in there for that first tap. Then when it's weakened, then you can start using Mualani. That'd probably look good. And I even thought about Hu Tao, but Hu Tao's thing is she really likes those vaporized teams. Mono Pyro Hu Tao just suffers a lot. She really wants to do reactions. So you could do like Farina, Yelan, Shilonen, but it's just overbearing on the Hydro.
The only way to really make it work, you'd still have to worry about the Cryo with Seatlali, so Mawika's still going to be a little difficult to worry about. I think that using like Mawika off-field, using Xiangling off-field for a while, once again, getting those Pyro attacks in to then get him into the Molten Dragon state form, and then jumping him, and then using Pyro attacks again to then weaken him, then you can use your Hydro and Cryo hits. Then you're actually able to do your rotations and everything fine. Just once again, just throwing a bunch of Pyro at him to get him to that state, and then get him further into the state by making him weakened is what you actually have to focus on. So and that's why it's going to be a little rough, is only because I think it's going to be based off application, so it might just be more based on more of an annoyance of time waste, really. So that's really the only thing to keep in mind.
I mean, Kanish Burning Team's going to be great too. I didn't mention that one, but I don't want to leave those people out. That'll be great. I know there's probably other teams we're leaving out. It's just what's coming to our mind. But that'll be definitely interesting to see. Can't wait for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that if we are looking into 5.5, everything really, really looks cool. If you guys are hyped about 5.5, let it go ahead and let us know down in the comments. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Also check out our Discord as well. And thank you guys for watching the video. We'll see you guys in the next one.